Good evening, everybody. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting of the Licensing and Regulation Committee taking place from the Wharton Suite in Winchester Guildhall. Time is 6:30. My name is Councillor Roger Bentote and I'm the chairperson of this committee. Please may I advise that the meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website, and a video recording of the meeting is being made and will be publicly available shortly afterwards. As usual, can you make sure your mobile phones and electronic devices are switched off or on silent? In the unlikely event of the fire alarm going or any alarm going, please follow any instructions from the officers and remember that the assembly point is in Abbey Gardens. So, turn to the agenda for tonight. Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies from Councillor Westwood, for whom Councillor Camoisen's deputising, and also from Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much. Disclosures of interest, anybody? I'm just expressing a disclosure that I am a ward councillor for this area, and so I have a personal but not prejudicial interest as far as I can see. Anyone else? Right, minutes of the meeting, last meeting on the 8th of December. Do we agree those minutes?
Agree.
We don't have any public participation, although Councillor Burden there is from Coatbridge Parish Council. Obviously they're interested in what's happening. And so we move on to item 5, which is the North Whiteley Community Governance Review. And we're expecting Councillor Cutler is going to introduce something. If you're with us, please, Councillor Cutler.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was expecting that I wouldn't be able to introduce because I understood that that wasn't actually possible from the monitoring officer. So I've been involved in the earlier discussions on the Central Winchester, not Central, what am I talking about? North Whiteley Review, and the papers as set out as the usual process of suggesting a range of options that will be consulted on, and then the most popular option will be refined as set out in the paper. So we had some consultation with both Coatbridge and Whiteley Town Council about the process earlier last year, and Karen has drawn up the process, so she's probably the best person to answer any questions or talk about further details.
Right, thank you, Councillor Cutler. So we just note what we are here to do. First is to decide whether governance review is needed and should be undertaken at this time. And if we do agree that, then we proceed to look at how it should be conducted. And we have a paper before us which gives some guidance on that. So Karen can say a few words, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, gentlemen and members. The situation is November at the North Whiteley Forum meeting, the City Council agreed that now was a good time to look at governance arrangements for the NDA. I've sent with you this evening a revised map which shows very clearly how the NDA sits across the two parishes of Whiteley Town Council, certainly in Coatbridge Parish. Occupations at the property when we wrote the report, or when I wrote the report, was at 451. Those figures were taken at the end of January this year. My occupations for that site are already at 502, with 1,174 properties in the process of being built and close to completion. So as you can see, the community there is growing at pace. advisory group, we were at the North Whiteley Forum, and we talked about if the community governance review was to happen, that we would have a community governance review advisory group made up of councillors and also electors from the community of the new MDA, and some who sit outside of that to gauge their views. And if we get approval from you this evening, we would be looking to consult with neighbouring parish councils, as well as working closely with Curbridge and Whiteley Town Council. I would apologise to you, there's a typo in the report at section 1.8 where it talks about 5 options, but I clearly list only 4, so I do apologise for that. And if I give you a flavour, Whiteley Town Council currently have 11 councillors. In December 18, their electoral register had just 2,200 electors, and they are currently at 2,500. Curbridge has 7 parish councillors currently. For the December 18 register, they were just over 1,100 electors. They are now today at just over 1,500, so that's quite a growth for that area. So therefore, I think we're at the stage where we agree that this community is growing very, very quickly, and to look at the governance options and to go to the people of that MDA and have conversations with them, consultations with them, and then come back to yourselves, if you're approved, around the June time with some options and with some further maps to show you what people are coming back to us and looking for in their area.
Thank you very much. Right, I think we move on to anybody. Any questions? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, Karen, this is very similar process that took place in the West of Waterlooville MDA. At what point was the decision made to go in the direction that they have actually travelled? Was that later on, about 500 or 600 houses in situ? I
would need to check that, councillor. I don't have that information to hand. I wasn't involved in that governance review. I know Councillor Cutler was, but I'm not sure at what build stage that was decided at for the Newlands Denmead situation.
Have we got an answer, Councillor Cutler?
The West of Waterlooville governance review, the one difference was that there was a petition, and normally the approach can be a petition or requests from the parish councils involved. So I think at Waterlooville, probably because we'd run a sort of interim process with the 2 parish councils, which I think you might have been involved with, Councillor Reid, what we call the West of Waterlooville Advisory Group, there wasn't quite the pressure that I get the impression exists in North Whiteley. Curbridge are actually finding it quite difficult to deal with the new development and are impatient. Whiteley Town Council are quite impatient about it. So it didn't reach the stage of a petition, whereas I think at West of Waterlooville, because we had some interim arrangements, there wasn't quite the urgency, and we went to the stage of getting a petition from residents to request the review. So yeah, it's a similar process, but it's actually started in a slightly different way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Questions? I think we're at a point where we could at least also discuss the point. Are we agreed that the governance review is necessary? Are we all agreed on that? So I think we need to just look at the procedure. Are there any questions on the procedure? Sorry, Councillor Clayton.
Oh.
Do my best. You hear me now? Yeah. This is the first one of these I've actually sat in on. So, if both parties want a review happens. So, is it a fair question to ask the parties?
I think,
Yes, it would save an awful lot of, to me, it would seem to save an awful lot of time if everybody's backing up the same issue.
They want the situation established so that the organisation of a parish is settled so that they know how to proceed from there. But you have to go through official procedures because these are legal procedures from above.
That part I understand. That part I understand.
So the point is we need to say let's go through the review, and the procedure that we have is reasonably straightforward, but I'm happy if anybody wants to raise any points on it.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, if I may go back to Karen, looking at the coloured map which you very kindly gave us this evening, I see there's a very small part, probably 25%, which is actually within the Whiteley Town Council area. I know there's some landscaping going in there. Do we know what the build numbers are in that element of it?
Yes, certainly, Councillor. The 3,500 properties that have current approval, the dwellings are approved. 2,680 of those properties will be built in what is currently Kirdridge Parish, and 820 dwellings will be built in what is currently Whiteley Town Council area. So there is a significant build in Kirdridge, as I said, in terms of the electorate. That will have a massive impact on their electorate and a massive strain on 7 councillors at Kirdridge Parish Council.
Yeah, that's why I noted, I think it was option 2, which would start a separate council in a similar way to the Negroes. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I was asked to deputise on this, and I had that fear of having been on many committees recently with 200 plus pages of report to read. I was totally delighted to see this one. Nice and short, straight to the point, reasonably straightforward to understand, at least I think it is, unless you've got some hidden stuff in there that I haven't quite spotted. So I think I've got some questions, and we've got a series of questions, so I'll just ask a couple now. On page 12, there's a sort of section 11.4, there's a stage 7 is consider any representations received as a result of the consultation stage. So what I'm kind of wanting to understand here is what some of these things actually mean in practice. You know, things like consider, what does that mean? Is it a tick box exercise, or is there something material that actually happens as a result of that? And then on part 9 in the same section, there's make an order to bring into effect any decision arising from the review. The question that begs is who makes the decisions and at what stages are decisions made, and what are the decision-making criteria? And I appreciate some of that might be laid out in the second section later on, but just want to get an understanding of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Councillor. So the route for community governance review is actually laid down in legislation, and so there are certain phases we pass through. The 4 options that we've given in the paper this evening are the 4 options that automatically come to mind. However, during a consultation process, and this consultation process, as I've said, is with the parishes themselves, electorate from the MDA area and neighbouring parishes. If other ideas that come forward, for example, if a significant proportion of the MDA built in Kirdridge came forward and said they wanted to form their own community council, that going forward to the next phase of consultation may be one of the options that would be considered. The reorganisation order would be a legal order where we can redraw, if necessary, parish boundaries, or we can incorporate a new parish within the 2 parishes that we currently have. And that is a formal reorganisation order that would see elections take place if, for example, it was for a new council in the May after the order is drawn. So we're talking about an order being drawn and made in April 23 if we go ahead with this process. and if, for instance, new councillors were to be elected, or we altered the size of either of the other parish councils, they would have an out of sequence parish election to make those arrangements solid, and then they'd go back to their normal election cycle. Does that help?
That's brilliant. Can I ask a supplementary? So you mentioned in that response that, you know, if there was a substantial number of people who live in the MDA came together and say, well, let's made it clear that they wanted their own sort of entity, governance entity. So that then gets into the question of what is in place already that could help facilitate that organisation. So, and relating this to my own ward, where we have Kings Barton, there is a residents' association, which I could envisage that could take the role of, if you like, non-politically canvassing the area to establish whether that was a view, you know, as I say, without having party politics involved. Is there the same thing in North Whiteley, effectively a residents' association that could do that?
Yeah, Councillor Cutler, if you want to comment, please.
Yes, I mean, I think the two points about this. I think within the consultation, there is an element of weighting of the responses towards the actual resident of the area that's new. So, in any consultation, and I think there was the earlier point made that you know, from Councillor McLean, that if the two neighbouring council or the two councils involved agreed a way forward, why not just approach it that way? I think it is partly because it means that the residents haven't had a say, so it's important to fulfil the whole process to get the right balance. I mean, and certainly at Newlands in West of Waterlooville, the outcome was what the two parishes involved would have liked, but because of work done before, there was quite a strong local community sense that that's what they wanted as well. You know, it was important that the people who lived there wanted that, not the original two parish council. You know, the original two wanted any particular outcome. So as I say, the balance of the consultation has to be weighted towards the residents of the new MDA.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody else want to ask questions? Right, thank you. So I think we've reached a point where we vote on or accept the recommendation.
On that question, sorry, I thought we were going to...
Sorry, yes.
So, okay. So, in section 1.5 on page 16, and I apologise for those of you who wanted a really quick meeting, there's how long will the community governance review take? And there's a timetable laid out. So my question, the context of my question is, we're just hopefully coming out of a pandemic. We don't know whether we're going to go back into lockdown at some point if some new variant comes along that's horrible. We've got something horrible going on in Ukraine that has all sorts of risks associated with it. So one could envisage that there might be circumstances where it might become difficult for the timetable, you know, for in practical terms, people to be consulted in the form of attending meetings and all that sort of thing. Is there scope by which the timetable can be paused or extended in some way to allow the proper consultations to take place?
Thank you very much. I wouldn't envisage that we would need to pause. I think we learned an awful lot during the COVID pandemic in terms of taking things online. I know their online meetings aren't enjoyed by everybody, but I'm certain that we could, whether we work through mail drops or utilising the resources in the local parish councils and other local community groups, that we could reach the new residents of the MDA. partially at the beginning we're looking at writing to all those registered in the MDA to make them aware that this is going on, and to make a call for people to come onto the advisory group. And you may have seen in our recent about Winchester that we have a small box. We didn't want to preempt the work of this committee, I have to say, but we did want to make a call to make people aware that this was something that was being considered, and if they wanted to come onto that advisory group, to make contact with me, to have a conversation. So I'm confident that we can reach enough people and have a meaningful consultation if we have to move away from, you know, we're looking at a public meeting in a community space on the MDA, etc. If we have to pull those because of health concerns or other concerns, I still feel confident we can meet the timetable.
Questions? Any further debate on this?
Yes, Chair, if I may.
Sorry, Councillor Reid.
From a certain amount of experience, though I wasn't part of direct consultation. It was the two parish councils to a great degree in Newlands, which was Southwark Parish Council and Denmead, that first negotiated the possibility of a standalone new council. Mainly because Southwark is a very small rural patch. In fact, the land was within their parish, was just one of those things. It was part of the big estate. And Denmead, 2 miles down the road, was already a large parish council with some 13 members. And it was felt that whilst it would have been nice to administer a little bit more from Denmead's point of view, I think Southwark found it somewhat overwhelming because they were 3 or 4 miles away with no direct link. Denmead was the B2150, which is the main road. Plus the fact it was going to be a very large animal difference. West Waterlooville is very much an urban area, urban style area, whereas Denmead is, as I say, a large market town, and Southwark is a very small rural area. So it really depends to a degree what communications are going on between the two parish councils in the sense how they feel. And I think by setting up this draft terms, it will give them the opportunity to start discussions, meaningful discussions, set within a tight framework.
Yeah, the situation is very similar, because Whiteley is very much a town, Curdridge very much a village, and the two councils have already liaised, and of course they also liaised through the North Whiteley Forum group, and they both have some ideas about what they actually want, but that ignores the people in the middle, the people moving into the MDA, which are going to be a lot of people, and very much depends on them as well. So you need to have this ongoing consultation with people moving into the area, giving people the opportunity to hear their views. There may well be some people who want to step forward and make their own council to start off with. Things like that could happen. So it really is a matter of waiting and see, and let the consultations and discussions happen. And when they've come to some agreement, they can come to us and say, this is what we'd like. Can you put the rubber stamp on it? Anybody else? Shall we agree this then? Councillor Cutley, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to make a point again, looking at how it worked in West Waterlooville. Of course, one of the points was that actually the boundaries changed during the consultation, because, you know, again, it had been consulted on the clear overwhelming option was to have a new parish, but you get to the second stage, which is the finesse element of things, and there was a change of the boundary originally suggested. So there are there is room for subtle changes, as Karen pointed out earlier, and again that's important that it was the residents who had been drawn into the MDA but actually lived outside of it, who decided that they didn't want to be part of the new parish council, you know, and it was just a balance, and so this process has that range. The other point I wanted to make was I understood from Lisa Kirkman that, you know, once you say yes to this, or if you say yes to this, that's the start of the process. It has to be completed in a year. And that's part of the legal process as well. So the point earlier about worrying about slippage, you go from today, it's got to be done in a year, and I don't think there's any way out of that.
Councillor McLean. Councillor McLean, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. No, just the resource that the council's going to take to do this. Are we sufficiently resourced to be able to do this in a year? Or if you've just been told we have to?
You're looking at the resource, sir.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yes, absolutely. So as you're aware, my title is Governance Manager. I have previously been very hands-on with election work. We have a very competent electoral services manager now, and I am able to step away from the day-to-day arranging of elections, which is what you've known me for, and I will concentrate on any governance reviews that we have, and that will be my priority along with other work in terms of the resource. I've got support from my colleagues in planning, so Hilary Oliver, who's the implementation manager. She and I have already been down to the site and had a walk through, and if we want to leaflet drop, etc. So there are other resources available, but I will be the primary resource that will prepare reports, etc. and compile the responses, because the stage 2, you'll know, the draft recommendations must come back to you with the reasons for those draft recommendations. So it isn't a draft of our choosing. I have to come back with an evidence base for you. So, Councillor Cromwell, I appreciate your comments about the brevity of this report. Going forward, the next one we ask you to look at will probably have far more detail, and we'll have, will need to be appendixed by comments from the parishes, comments from individuals, and findings from the bi-monthly meetings of the advisory group, if that goes ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Are we agreed we're going to finish here? Or are we happy with what we've agreed? That this is a procedure and we will get it done within the year. Well, thank Karen for all her work on this.
You need to vote.
Sorry, we thank Karen for got my microphone on. Apologies. So yes, we agree this and thank Karen. Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Right, as it is 18:57, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you for coming.
You didn't look at the minutes.